Because we're forced to sell our oil at a discount, Canada's economy is losing an estimated $80 million a day.
Because they send us oil, we'll see. It depends on what the price is. If the oil is properly priced, if they treat us properly, which they don't, we will be able to make that up very quickly because we don't need the products that they have. We have all the oil you need.
It was just a few years ago that Donald Trump dismissed Canadian oil as unnecessary, insisting that America didn't need it. But now, he's pushing to rebuild a pipeline that he once treated as an afterthought. So, what changed? And why is Trump suddenly scrambling to get Canadian oil back into the picture? Back in his first term, Trump was all about America First energy policies. He boasted about U.S. oil independence and played down the need for imports, including Canadian crude. He even withdrew support for certain projects that would have strengthened North American energy ties. But now, with global markets in flux, oil prices rising, and Canada making moves that threaten U.S. energy security, Trump has done a complete 180. His latest push? A renewed effort to revive the Keystone XL pipeline, a project that was killed off multiple times due to environmental concerns and shifting political priorities. But Trump isn't backing down. He's calling for reconstruction, arguing that the U.S. needs reliable Canadian oil more than ever. Here's where things get even more complicated. Trump's stance comes at a time when he's also fueling a trade war with Canada. His aggressive tariffs, 25% on key imports, have pushed Canada to retaliate, targeting $155 billion in American goods. That means higher prices on everything from food to vehicles, not to mention the critical minerals needed for U.S. energy production. So, will Trump's new strategy fix the problem, or is he just making things worse? And what's Canada's next move? Because if there's one clear thing, it's that Canada isn't backing down.
I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods.
Trump's stance on energy has always been a balancing act, sometimes promoting American energy independence, other times pushing for foreign oil partnerships. And that contradiction is more evident now than ever. During his first term, Trump championed U.S. self-sufficiency, celebrating a booming domestic oil industry and reducing reliance on imports. He touted the expansion of drilling, fracking, and offshore projects, boasting that America was now the world's top oil producer. At the time, he even downplayed the importance of Canadian oil, suggesting that the U.S. could do just fine without it.
We don't need what they have, and for us to be subsidizing Canada to the tune of $175 billion a year and subsidizing Mexico to the tune of $250 billion, $300 billion a year.
His administration pulled back on cross-border projects, opting instead to boost production at home. But fast forward to today, and Trump is singing a different tune. Now, he's demanding that Keystone XL be revived, insisting that Canadian oil is crucial for U.S. energy security. The contradiction is hard to ignore. How does a president who once claimed the U.S. didn't need Canadian oil suddenly pivot to insisting that a pipeline from Canada is a necessity? It's a clear case of political whiplash. On one hand, Trump still claims that the U.S. should be energy independent. On the other hand, he's openly pushing for reliance on Canadian crude.
No oil tariffs. No, I don't. Well, I didn't say that. You said that. No.
His fluctuating messaging, sometimes criticizing Canada, sometimes calling for cooperation, has only fueled confusion. The Keystone XL pipeline forms the pivot around which this energy conflict revolves. It has provided a site for multiple political confrontations. The Keystone XL project was proposed in 2008 as a means of transporting over 800,000 barrels of oil daily from Alberta, Canada, to United States Gulf Coast refineries. The reasoning seems simple. If Canada has the oil and the U.S. has the refineries, then a pipeline to connect the two would ensure energy efficiency and reduce energy. Trump had been asserting for a long time that the eastbound translator construction would increase U.S. holdings of energy, sustain cheap fuel prices, and create thousands of jobs. During his presidency, he cleared the project after it was blocked by President Obama. Later, it was again canceled by Biden on environmental grounds. Supporters say a bit of a victory for both countries: reinstatement of Keystone XL. Jobs that would arise from this line would provide 10,000 to 20,000 jobs to the local economy. Not to mention, the U.S. is still importing a considerable amount of oil. Having stable supply from Canada is a way to avert possible spikes on prices.
Our response will also be far-reaching and include everyday items such as American beer, wine, and bourbon.
The other side of the coin sees it altogether differently. Environmentalists have battled against the project for years over fears of oil spills, damage to indigenous lands, and increased carbon emissions. They argue that rather than maintaining their fossil fuel infrastructure, the United States should move toward renewable energy alternatives. Then, it's about protecting indigenous rights. Many Native American tribes in the United States, along with First Nations groups in Canada, adamantly opposed Keystone XL, stating that it threatened their lands and water supplies. The existing legal tussles and protests have delayed the project in the past, and if Trump tries to revive it anytime again, the resistance will probably be heavier. So, will Trump's push for Keystone XY revive it? Or is he just fanning the flames of controversy for his political gain? Do the supposed bargaining chips presently available to Washington hold water with Canada looking to engage in trade somewhere else? Because if there's one thing Canada has made clear, it will not simply take orders from the United States. The Keystone XL pipeline was once a symbol of cooperation in energy in North America. Too bad it became one of the most controversial projects in recent times. In 2021, President Biden on his very first day in office withdrew the permit for the project, with climate considerations being the main reason. That decision meant the death of the pipeline, putting pressure on TC Energy, the Canadian operator of Keystone XL, to officially terminate the project later that year. It was more than that. It was a real decision, with real consequences. By canceling the Keystone pipeline, Biden forced the contractor TC Energy to tear down much of the installed infrastructure, wasting years in the planning and billions in investment. Construction on site was suspended, employees were released, and then the company was entirely redirected. Instead of just fighting for a project blocked time and again, TC Energy began to turn the other way. It majorly redirected investment toward its renewable energy business, focusing on wind, solar, and hydrogen projects. It became apparently clear the Keystone XL was history for them, whether or not a future administration tried to revive it. That's what makes Trump's recent push to revive Keystone XL so complicated. Even if he were to approve the pipeline again, it wouldn't simply resume where it left off. The project would require new permits, environmental approvals, and billions of dollars in fresh investment. And with TC Energy already committed to renewables, who would even take on the project? For Trump, Keystone XL is a political talking point, a way to blame Biden for high gas prices and appeal to voters who support American energy dominance. But in reality, reviving the pipeline wouldn't be easy, cheap, or quick.
Tariffs, as you know, will start a week earlier than the reciprocal, which is going to be on a couple of weeks earlier. Reciprocal tariffs start on April 2nd. And I wanted to make it April 1st, but I didn't want to go April Fool's Day, because that costs a lot of money, but that one day. But so we're going April 2nd. But very importantly, tomorrow tariffs 25% on Canada and 25% on Mexico, and that'll start. So they're going to have a tariff. So what they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs.
While Trump pushes to restore energy ties with Canada, he's also escalating a trade war that threatens to do the exact opposite. On February 24, 2025, he confirmed new tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports, hitting key industries with a 25% tax. This move sent shockwaves through the market, especially because it targeted industries that have deep economic ties to the U.S. Everything from beef and bourbon to automobiles and electronics was affected. American manufacturers, already struggling with inflation, suddenly faced higher costs for raw materials and parts. Canadian exporters, seeing demand drop overnight, began looking for alternative markets. Energy products, however, received slightly better treatment. Instead of a 25% tariff, Canadian oil and gas imports faced a reduced 10% tax. That small concession showed that even Trump recognized Canada's role in supplying US refineries. But that doesn't mean Canada took the move lightly. Within hours, the Canadian government announced countermeasures, hitting $155 billion worth of US goods with retaliatory tariffs. From dairy to industrial machinery, Canadian officials made it clear they weren't going to be pushed around. Trump justified the tariffs by claiming that Canada had taken advantage of the US for years, echoing the rhetoric he used during his first term. But the immediate market reaction told a different story. Canadian exports dropped sharply, and American companies reliant on Canadian materials scrambled to adjust. So, will this trade war push Canada and the US further apart? Or will economic pressure force a compromise? One thing's for sure. Trump's policies aren't just making headlines. They're reshaping North America's economic future.
To protect our economy, we will stand up for Canadians every single second of every single day, because this country is worth fighting for. It's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal. But Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing to do.
Trump's tariffs in 2025 not only put jitters in the marketplace, immediately they started a very belligerent response from Canada. The government of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau didn't waste time before throwing punches, announcing a two-stage counter-tariff strategy targeting specific US industries. The first phase of tariffs, 30 billion Canadian dollars, which came into effect at a particular point in time, imposed tariffs on a comprehensive list of US imports, including agricultural products and processed foods, as well as beverages, appliances, and industrial materials. Canadian officials made no bones that the tariffs were neither symbolic nor aimed at snazzy public relations for their country. These new taxes met real pressure for the first time on American business markets, which were heavily reliant on sales from the US to Canadian businesses, from Midwestern farmers to major manufacturers. This was merely the beginning. Escalating the trade war even more, Canada slapped another 125 billion Canadian dollars in tariffs on some of America's largest exports: automobiles, aerospace products, and agricultural goods as part of Phase 2, which goes into effect on March 25, 2025. This is directed to some of Michigan, Texas, and California powerhouses in the nation's economy, with solid ties to Canada originally targeted by this next round of tariffs. Beyond tariffs, additional measures are being mulled by Canada that would include restrictions on exports of critical minerals such as lithium, nickel, and cobalt. These are necessary for producing electric vehicle batteries. Limiting those foundations may disrupt US supplies in a devastated condition by the demand for more electric vehicles, as well as the push from the Biden administration for green energy. The Trudeau government has advanced the course for sanctions beyond just tariffs. What more does Canada have to offer? All these seem to be part of countermeasures preparing the ground to make it tougher for US businesses to operate across the northern border from their home offices. Blocking US companies from bidding on Canadian government contracts is possibly going to be among the biggest ones. It could have some dire ramifications for American companies heavily dependent on the Canadian market for business in relatively large sectors such as defense, infrastructure, and technology. The countermeasures threaten to change business from one Euro-Asian competitor to another. One of the most notable is sending back control over oil and natural gas exports. Although Donald Trump has been advocating a closer approach with Canada on energy, tariffs by him have pushed the country farther away. The United States would experience pressures on domestic fuel prices if Canada decided to restrict supplies of its energy to the United States, as American refiners suffer shortages. In the meantime, the Ontario Liquor Control Board, which is the largest buyer of alcohol within Canada, announced that it would be pulling US alcohol from its store shelves. Though it may appear a small step for US consumption, the reality is that it has a major value behind it. Annual sales in liquor stores in Ontario add up to billions, and removing American whiskey, bourbon, and beer could cause damage to U.S. beverage companies. Overall, the strategy that Canada is following is straightforward. Damage to the United States must be inflicted with minimum damage to its own economy. While targeting politically sensitive policy areas and critical resources, Canada ensures that Trump's tariffs are expensive contingencies. The question at this point is, how far can the trade war go without both countries returning to the negotiation table?
When you threatened tariffs on Canada a couple weeks ago, Justin Trudeau rushed down here. He wanted to make nice. Now he's on the way out. Is that what you wanted?
I didn't think he was going to quit. He probably saw the numbers. Look, I called him Governor Trudeau because they should be the 51st state, really. It would make a great state. And the people of Canada like it. They'd pay lower taxes. They have virtually no military. They have a very small military. They pay less than 1%. They're about the lowest payer in NATO. They're supposed to pay much more. They haven't been paying.
Trump has added to the tension with remarkably hostile language. One of the most shocking things he has said is that Canada should be the 51st state of the USA, thus negating its sovereignty and enraging thousands across the country. That comment, which can only be deemed insulting or viewed as a twisted fantasy, serves to further deepen the chasm. Amidst a full-blown trade war and diplomatic relations going south, how far will this rift go? What do you think? Will Trump's hardline approach backfire, or will Canada find a way to turn the tables? Let us know in the comments.